DC has one of the darkest comic book universes out there, so it's no surprise that their rogues gallery is filled with some of the most horrific villains around. Villains that are so terrifying many of them have yet to even make their way to the silver screen. The Man-Bat is not always a villain of Batman's. He has been known to sometimes be an ally as well. But when Dr. Kirk Langstrom is in his Man-Bat form, he is always horrifying. So horrifying that the closest thing we got to him was in one of Batman's nightmares from Batman v Superman in the DCEU. However, this wasn't really specified to be Man-Bat specifically. Dr. Langstrom aimed to create a serum to help the deaf and blind, but accidentally made a serum that also transformed anyone who used it into a giant bat-like creature. Both he and his wife suffer from its effects at one point, becoming the Man-Bat and She-Bat respectively. It would be cool to see a horror-style Batman film featuring these two monstrous and sometimes villainous characters. Number 9. Solomon Grundy. While he's appeared in lots of animated films, Solomon Grundy has yet to make his debut in the live-action world of the DCEU. This could be because of his monstrous appearance. Solomon Grundy is a zombie-like villain who sometimes ends up as a hero depending on the circumstances. He has a Frankenstein-type vibe to him as well, which likely makes him too monster-like for the likes of the DCEU. Although there are so many horror-inspired characters and villains in DC Comics that would be cool to see if that genre made its way more into the films. Horror DC, I would watch those movies. Number 8. Hugo Strange. Hugo Strange has a place in the television series Gotham, where he is played by B.D. Wong, and is depicted as the chief of psychiatry at Arkham Asylum. But we have yet to see the insane mad scientist make an appearance in the DC Extended Universe. Because he is often closely tied these days to Arkham Asylum both in the comics and in the Batman video games, it would be kind of hard to introduce this madman who has a tendency to experiment on patients and transform them into monsters into the DCEU without first introducing the famed Asylum. Hugo is a formidable and frightening Batman foe, not just because of how insane he is, but because of how brilliant he is too.
It's a perfect plan. With this machine, I can imagine Batman to be anyone I choose. And these fools will pay a fortune for it.
He was even able to use his smarts and deductive reasoning to uncover Batman's true identity. Number 7. Mr. Mixie Pizyedelik. So, Mr. Mixie might not be horrifying to look at. He's kinda silly looking, truth be told, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be scared of him. He has more power than you can possibly imagine. And in fact, anything that he can imagine can come to pass, should he will it. The only limit to his reality-altering powers are the limitations of his own imagination. Like Batman's Joker, he has at times claimed to be the ultimate Superman foe. In one story to prove this, he even killed all of Superman's enemies and allies just to prove how evil he was. Mr. Mixie also forced Superman to kill him as well, forcing Superman to break his own moral code. Ooh. Talk about being on Joker's terrifying level of ultimate villainy.
Oh, I don't feel so good. But it's still worth it.
Number 6. James Gordon Jr. He might not be on Mr. Mixie's level in terms of his power set, but James Gordon Jr. is one terrifying and creepy villain. As his name implies, he is related to Commissioner Gordon and is in fact his son. Surprisingly, James is not like his dad and grows up instead to become a psychotic serial killer, exhibiting early warning signs from a young age that there is something very wrong with him. He used to pick apart and torture animals and was suspected as being involved in the disappearance of one of Barbara's friends, Bess Keller, though nothing was ever proven. He ends up returning to Gotham and is revealed to be a full-out serial killer who enjoys torturing his victims to death in Black Mirror. Later on, he ends up joining the Suicide Squad and becomes the team's strategy analyzer. Man, I would not want to work with James Gordon Jr. on the Suicide Squad. I'd be like, ugh. No thanks. Number 5. Papa Midnight. Papa Midnight is a villain to John Constantine for the most part. Sometimes he's an ally, but more often he's not, as the man is obsessed with power and is a pretty bad dude. Papa Midnight grew up in Trenchtown, Jamaica. Born Linton Midnight, from a young age he became inspired by tales of dark magic that his parents had told him. He betrayed a group of slaves, conning them into believing that they would be protected if they rebelled, which led to their deaths, and later went on to sell his sister's soul into demon slavery, so that he could achieve more power for himself through using her soul as a barter chip, selling it to the demons of hell. Ooh. Considering how violent and insidious Papa Midnight is, we likely won't be seeing him in the DCEU, although he has managed to make an appearance in the CW Arrowverse, which is pretty impressive. Number 4. Crib. How does one even make a villain like Crib in the DCEU, just from a visual standpoint? Like, ooh, that'd be a lot of effects, I think. Crib is a member of the Sinestro Corps. She is described as being an alien hag and is 100% something out of a nightmare. Lots of Baba Yaga vibes here as well. However, instead of being associated with eating children, as Baba Yaga sometimes is, Crib's purpose is to kidnap the newly born children of Green Lanterns who are also parents. Crib will even go to the lengths of giving her pregnant victims 4 cesareans in order to secure their children. Ugh. She keeps the kidnapped newborns in her hunchback, which looks like a creepy bone crib, and promptly kills the parents of any children whom she has taken away. What's more disturbing is it's never explained why Crib has this compulsion. It's just something she feels inspired to do. I guess she doesn't think Green Lanterns make for great parents? She's like, I'll be a way better parent to these babies with my weird bone crib. Super qualified. Number 3. Dollmaker. Dollmaker has a horrific origin, which makes it hard to introduce him without going full horror film mode. When Barton Mathis was young, he would go camping with his father, who it turns out was a serial killer. While camping, Barton would not only witness his father kill people, but also commit acts of cannibalism. He also saw his father killed when apprehended by the police. Years later, Mathis would grow up to be a gifted but deranged surgeon who was obsessed with using his victims' body parts to craft dolls. He wears a mask made of human skin and was the one who helped Joker to remove his face during the lead up to the death of the family storyline. Number 2. A Black Lantern Corps. One of the most terrifying villain groups, both appearance-wise and in terms of their threat level, is the Black Lantern Corps. Of course, this would be a hard supervillain group to introduce, being that we'd likely need Green Lanterns to be on the scene to help explain, well, just who the Black Lantern Corps are and why we should care about them. After all, you can't defeat the Black Lantern Corps anyways without the entire emotional spectrum of lanterns assembled to help create that White Lantern power. This threat might also just be too huge and horrific to make an appearance due to the sheer size of their numbers. In the Blackest Night storyline, they were like an overwhelmingly sized zombie apocalypse level of threat, killing heroes and resurrecting them to join their deadly ranks. Number 1. Batman Who Laughs. It might be a little too confusing for the DCEU to introduce the Batman Who Laughs, as that would mean they'd likely have to involve the dark multiverse somewhere in their films, and the dark multiverse is likely too dark even for DC to make that happen on the big screen. The Batman Who Laughs is an alternate version of Batman who was infected by Joker venom after being pushed too far by the villain, causing him to lash out and kill the Joker, snapping his neck. This caused Batman to become infected, driving him insane and causing him to take down his own world's Justice League and kill his own Bat family, save for Damian Wayne, who he convinced to join him. He's one of the biggest bads in DC's current storylines. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. What are some of your favorite DC supervillains? Who do you think is the scariest? Who do you think we'll never see in the DCEU? Which scary villain would you love to see in the DCEU? Let us know in the comments below. And speaking of comments, it's time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 Gender-Bended Superheroes Part 2. FR Isty comments, gosh, I didn't know the ship Stony was canon. In another reality, but still canon. Yes, it is, and it's actually kind of great. Strong enough of a ship that it worked its way into its own alternate world. Sunstar comments, great list, I didn't know about a lot of these. Amanda, you may have earned another cosplay request in Hellgirl. Oh my, I'm gonna need a lot of red body paint for that one. Let's see, so we have Madeline Pryor, Vampy, Scarlet Witch is coming up next, my Black Widow is already in development, and I will have to add Hellgirl to my list, maybe under my Cheetah body paint cosplay, just all the body paint cosplays. I'm actually finally gearing up to sit down and read Hellboy in its entirety, so a Hellgirl cosplay might be a good way to celebrate upon finishing that series. That arm though, how will I make the arm? Number 10. Court of Owls. The Court of Owls is a villainous and powerful group who seek to exert and wield political influence in order to shape the world as they choose. They are enemies of Batman and often use their group of highly skilled assassins known as Talons to eliminate those who stand in their way. These assassins are also immortal to an extent, as they are often imbued with a metallic alloy known as Electrum, which has astounding healing properties and can even reanimate and resurrect dead tissue. The Court of Owls was created by Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, first appearing as adversaries to Bruce Wayne in the 2011 Batman series in issue number 2. Number 9. Granny Goodness. Her name might not make her sound terrifying, but Granny Goodness is not as sweet as her name makes her out to be. She became a trainer of Darkseid's soldiers after impressing him when she herself was selected to train and become one of his elite hounds. Fans of Kingsman may find the story of how she was trained very familiar. During her training regimen, she was given a dog to train herself, who stayed with her and progressed alongside her. After bonding with the animal, whom she named Mercy, she was later instructed to kill it. Goodness refused and instead killed her trainer. When Darkseid asked her why she had done this, she revealed that Mercy was worth more than her trainer had been to Darkseid, as Goodness had trained the dog to not only be loyal to her, but to Darkseid above her. Darkseid tested the theory by ordering Mercy to kill Goodness and was impressed when he found the dog actually obeyed. Goodness of course was forced to kill Mercy, but this act would inspire Darkseid to shape and use Granny Goodness as his most reliable trainer and recruiter of soldiers, with Goodness being responsible for brainwashing those she trained and becoming the most loyal and fearless members of Darkseid's army. Number 8. Black Flash. In the comics, Black Flash acts as a symbol of death, and also sometimes as literal death for the speedsters. You see, the former Flashes and past speedsters have all been too fast for regular death to touch them, and so it seems instead they have their own version. Enter the Black Flash. The Black Flash draws power from the Speed Force like many of the other speedsters we've seen. This being is able to freeze time, but only for those who do not possess potent super speed powers. It resembles death in appearance, looking like a corpse of a zombified version of the Flash. While Black Flash has appeared in the Arrowverse, this Speed Force entity has yet to appear in the DCEU. Number 7. Mandrak the Dark Monitor. Mandrak is a pretty confusing entity, but also a fairly scary one. Mandrak was once, or is, depending on what you believe, Dax Novu. And Dax Novu was once part of the Monitor. Following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the injuries the Monitor had suffered caused it to splinter somewhat, dividing its body and creating other, smaller monitors. Dax Novu was one of these monitors. He eventually realized that the monitors were parasitic beings who were feeding on the energies of the multiverse, slowly consuming and destroying it. He informed the other monitors of this, but was shunned for attempting to share his realization. Dax then became corrupted, turning into a dark monitor known as Mandrak. While we might eventually see the Monitor and Anti-Monitor make their way into the DCEU films, it's unlikely we'll see this dark monitor pop up anytime soon. Number 6. Anti-Monitor. Speaking of monitors, we should also quickly touch on another scary and powerful one, sort of the scary and powerful one, the Anti-Monitor. Anti-Monitor is a supremely powerful villain who threatened the very existence of the multiverse during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He controlled the antimatter universe, and is hell-bent on ensuring the destruction of all things. So much so that even after Anti-Monitor is defeated, Necron ended up trapping the Anti-Monitor's body, and as it was later revealed in Blackest Night, using it as a source of power for the Black Central Power Battery. While we might get a sort of Crisis-inspired storyline in the DCEU with all different alternate universes and timelines from DC in television and film being acknowledged, it's more likely that they'll go the Flashpoint route as opposed to the Crisis on Infinite Earths route. Number 5. Dr. Death. The most recent incarnation of Dr. Death from Prime Earth was only around for 5 issues, so it's not just his horrific story and appearance that will likely bar him from appearing in the DCEU. It's also just that he isn't really one of the main villains. He doesn't have as much clout. However, in the few issues we did see him in, he proved to be a terrifying villain and foe. Dr. Carl Helfern was a brilliant scientist working for Wayne Enterprises on a serum that would strengthen bones, causing them to become more durable instead of breaking when under stress. However, his failed attempts combined with other mental trauma and strain caused him to go insane. He killed his scientific team, injecting them with a failed version of the serum that caused their bones to grow until they were ripped apart. Number 4. The Corinthian. The Corinthian isn't specifically from DC directly itself, but is from an imprint of theirs that used to be known as Vertigo. Well, it's still known as Vertigo, but it no longer exists. It was discontinued, and instead we got Black Label, which is also an amazing line, but everyone was obviously still sad to see Vertigo go. One of Vertigo's most famous series was Sandman, which also featured some of DC's characters who made cameos throughout. The Corinthian, however, was not one of these, but is a character unique to the world of Sandman. While we are getting a Netflix series for Sandman in in 2021, I also think it would be super cool to get some darker toned DC films. Among them, it would be cool to get some Sandman or at least a Sandman film, although the Corinthian might be too monstrous to actually make an appearance, even if we did get a Sandman film. He is one of the nightmares that Dream made. At one point, he escapes the dreaming and ventures out in the world, where he becomes a serial killer who pulls out and eats his victims' eyes. He himself has mouths where his eyes should be and usually wears sunglasses to disguise his monstrous appearance. Ugh, eating eyes. It allows him to see everything that you've seen, which is, gross still. No, it's still gross. Number 3. Dr. Destiny. Speaking of Sandman, I want to talk in particular about another horrific villain who appeared there, although this one also exists as a horror and supervillain within the direct DC Comics universe as well. There he wielded a device he'd invented called the Materiopticon. This device was later retconned to be Morpheus's Dreamstone, which his mother gave him, when Dr. D appeared in Sandman. Dr. Destiny was hypnotized by the Justice League to prevent him from dreaming and becoming too powerful. As a result, he was driven insane and ended up in Arkham Asylum, wasting away, becoming a skeletal version of himself. When he escaped, he wreaked havoc at an all-night 24 hours diner where he tortured the patrons and staff before Dream finally caught up with him. Thank goodness, cause that issue, woo, it's crazy. Number 2. Professor Pyg. Professor Pyg's real name is Laszlo Valentin. He is a former Spiral agent who went insane and became obsessed with curing people of their individualism in order to perfect them. When the crime syndicate temporarily took over Earth, Gotham City was overtaken by the criminals who ruled in Batman's absence. Pyg himself used the hospital as his own HQ and worked from there, kidnapping civilians, sedating them, and transforming them with strange, cosmetic, and mutilating procedures, using involuntary patients to create his own horrific Dollatron army. He was created by Grant Morrison and Andy Kubert, and also first appeared in 2011's Batman series. Number 1. Jane Doe. Jane Doe is a serial killer who served time at Arkham Asylum. She appears to not have any skin of her own, appearing to be covered in exposed muscle tissue. Instead, she covets the skin and lives of others. While she doesn't appear to have any specific superpowers, it has been implied that she might be possible of shapeshifting. She often gets to know her victims before killing them and adopting their identities, sometimes even wearing their preserved skin as a suit, instead of simply using makeup to disguise herself. For example, I could be Jane Doe right now and you wouldn't even know. That's how good she is at it. Oh my goodness.